my own personal finances were a disaster, despite the fact that I had an accounting degree. And sometimes when you fall in love with someone who's a manipulator, they can cause your heart to hijack your wallet. And that's exactly what happened to me.
What would you say is like the next steps that someone in that situation needs to do to start to heal?
If you are in a relationship with someone who is emotionally manipulative, you're not seeing things clearly. And so one of the things that I had to do once I left that relationship was to heal my relationship with money. One of the things that hit me was, oh my gosh, I'm not stressed about money. The last 7 years, that's all I have done. Like, I have lived under this constant anxiety. I just noticed that, oh my gosh, I am relaxed in a place deep down inside. Like, I had almost forgotten how that felt.
Christine Luken is a financial dignity coach who is a 4-time author of money books to help you become more confident and also get to keep your money. And we're here to talk to her about her latest book, Provider Money, Pleasure Money. Christine, such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for being here.
I am so excited to be here in person.
I know. We met years ago at a program that we were taking together, and I have seen you grow and have seen just in awe. I've just been in awe of everything that you have been doing out there in the online world. So
Thank you.
I'm so excited to get to talk to you about this. So before we start, can you please tell everybody what is it that you do right now and who you help right now?
Right now, I do financial coaching primarily for high-earning couples and individuals who are great earners, but they're not great at keeping and managing what they earn. So I lovingly refer to them as high-income hot mess.
High-income hot mess.
Yes.
I can totally relate.
Yes.
I can totally
They
relate.
have very
to that.
busy lives. They have a lot of moving parts with their money, and they really need someone to help them get in there, get organized, dig through all the details, and make sure that money is supporting their happiness, because they're making too much money to be treading water, and they really want to start making some progress.
And I understand that your story was a little bit similar in that you started out working for the family business. You didn't just wake up one day and decide to be like a money coach. Like something happened there because you were making pretty good money.
Yes.
Right? You were working with people that you knew, that loved, that care for you. Why even change that?
Yeah. Well, it would have been very easy to have stuck with working for the family business. Part of it was I didn't feel challenged.
What did you do? What was your role?
I was the vice president of HR and accounting. I was also part owner, so I was the only woman partner in the business. I had been there for 13 years, and I'd basically moved up as high as I was going to move up in the company. And for many people, they would be fine with that. You know, they're like, hey, I'm getting ownership payouts. I'm making 6 figures. This is great. However, for me, I'm a Capricorn. And I am your typical Capricorn. I am always looking for what's the next challenge, what's the next achievement. And I didn't just pick financial coaching out of thin air. So if we rewind a little bit, I hit financial rock bottom when I was in my mid-20s. I'd been working for the family business, not even a year. So here I was, I had just gotten a starting accountant position with the family business because my dad was not into nepotism. He's like, I'm not hiring you until there's a position available, and then whatever that position is, you can apply for it, you can interview for it, but you're not going to be handed something on a silver platter. So I had been working as a staff accountant for the family business, and yet at the same time, my own personal finances were a disaster. Despite the fact that I had an accounting degree, despite the fact that, all through college, I had worked for banks and had always worked in the financial sector. So you're probably thinking, well, what was your problem, right? Like you had all the head knowledge.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, what is your problem? Were the words in my mind.
who was your problem might be the better question. So I was engaged to a guy, I call him Jeff to protect the not so innocent. He was not great with money. He was in and out of jobs and even in and out of jail. And I thought, if I just loved him enough that he would change. And he did. He got worse.
Oh.
So he was very good at talking me out of my money. He was very good at emotionally manipulating me into helping him with things that he should really be doing himself. And so I had found myself caught in this cycle, in this unhealthy relationship. There was a lot of shame and embarrassment around that because I was someone who should have known better. Now, I was the AB student, honor roll, scholarships. I loved math. I worked for banks, but I also have a really big heart. And sometimes when you fall in love with someone who's a manipulator, they can cause your heart to hijack your wallet. And that's exactly what happened to me. So I found myself at age 26 in the hole financially. My credit score was close to the bottom. I don't know exactly what it was. I was too afraid to look. I had collectors calling me. I had the bank calling me saying, we're going to come get your vehicle if you don't catch up on this payment. So by the time I got to that rock bottom point of knowing that I had to leave that relationship, I had no money to leave that relationship. And it was a very humbling experience for me to have to go to my dad and say, I have completely effed this up, despite knowing better. Can you help me? Now, he said, yes, I will help you. However, I'm not bailing you out. I'm not just handing you over a chunk of money. I'm not lending you money, but here's what I'm going to do. I will give you a safe place to regroup. I will sit down with you. I will help you create a plan, and then we'll get you launched back out on your own. So I was so desperate to leave my ex. I was like, I will do anything. Like anything that you tell me to do, I will do. And
your dad sounds like a very smart man.
He is a very smart man. Dad, if you're listening, thank you.
What's his name?
Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
So it took me 3 or 4 months to dig out of my hole enough so that I could save some money to get a down payment for another apartment. I mean, I had to sweet talk that rental agent into letting me rent that apartment. I gave her my sob story of why my credit was in the crapper, and thankfully she believed me. And so getting out of that relationship obviously helped a lot because now I was only responsible for myself. And as I started repairing my finances, one of the things that hit me was, oh my gosh, I'm not stressed about money. And I wasn't even completely out of the hole yet. But I had a plan. I was working the plan, and things were consistently getting better. And I was like, the last 7 years, that's all I have done. Like, I have lived under this constant anxiety. Whether it was low-level anxiety, usually it was at least low-level anxiety with spikes of very high anxiety because, God forbid, one of my pets gets sick or, the car needs a new battery or whatever, and I'm already in the hole, and how are we going to figure this out, right? So I just noticed that, oh my gosh, I am relaxed in a place deep down inside. Like, I had almost forgotten how that felt, because I started dating this guy when I was 19, right? So then I started thinking, there's probably a lot of other people out there who are in the same position, who they don't even realize how stressed they are about money. They don't even, they think it's just the head knowledge piece of it. And as I started looking, all the gurus that had books out there, the Dave Ramseys, the Susie Ormans, they were giving you the financial checklist. but they weren't addressing the issues of the heart. They weren't addressing the emotional piece of it. And I knew that was a big piece that was missing. Now, at that moment, I didn't know how I was going to contribute to that, how I was going to fix that, how I was going to help that. That unfolded gradually. Not too long after that, the church that I was going to brought on Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. And they said, hey, we know your story, because I started going to church with my dad. And they said, you've been through this. Maybe, you can help facilitate the class. And I loved it. And the people loved it when I shared my story, because they're like, oh, well, thank God, I'm not the only one that's a mess. Like, oh, you were a mess too. There's hope for me. And so I ended up facilitating his course for over 10 years. And in the middle of that, I found out that he actually had a certification where you could be he called it a financial counselor, which is really what it was, because part of it was financial and part of it was counseling. Now, back then, they didn't teach you how to run it as a business, because nobody was doing it as a business. This was just like, okay, God has got me out of this mess. This is my way of giving back to other people. And that's what I did. I was teaching the class. I would, the people that needed more help, then I would sit down with them. I would take an hour and sit down with them and help them put together their budget. And the more I did it, the more I loved it. And so a lot of people who are over 30 remember 2008, 2009, 2010. The economy was not that great. Things were not great at the family business. I could see the financial struggle there. Obviously, I was the accountant. And that caused me a little bit of stress, because I had met my husband, Nick, who is extremely responsible with money. Which, let me tell you, you date a guy who's not great with money, all of a sudden, fiscal responsibility becomes super sexy. Yeah. Like, ooh, you max out your 401k? That's so hot.
Right.
And all of our income eggs were in one basket, working for the family business. And so I thought, I'm already doing this financial coaching thing. Let me start a side hustle. I started out charging $75 for a 90-minute session. And the more I did it, I was like, oh, people will pay for this. Because at first I thought, well, these people are broke. How are they going to pay me $75 for this session? And let me tell you, if it's important to them, they will find the money. And of course, I charge a lot more now. But the more I did it, the more I loved it. And I got to this point where it was almost crushing my soul to not do it full time. And that is nothing negative about the family business. Oh, I enjoyed my time there, but I knew that this was my soul's purpose.
Can we go back? Thank you so much for sharing your full story, because I know that there are people listening right now who are like, wait a minute, can you press pause on the toxic relationship?
Yeah.
Because it's not just, being in love with someone who's really bad with finances, but also it's how we behave when we are with them, the things that we allow to happen, the things that we just turn a blind eye or sweep under the rug, the feeling that, no, we are nice people, so we want to help that person.
Yeah.
And so I want you to tell me more about like the emotion of money, and let's just zoom in on that situation. People who are listening, who are not in the best financial situation because they have a partner that they feel like they continuously have to enable.
Let me tell you, counseling was one of the best things that I did when I left, because I didn't even know what the word codependent meant. But essentially, I was being Jeff's mom. I was being his money mom. I was taking care of things that he should have been taking care of for himself. Now, that was not the only area where I was being his mom. I mean, I was making doctor's appointments for him. I was calling in sick to work for him. I was basically taking responsibility for his misbehavior. Now, there was also a lot of drinking, drug use, all kinds of other stuff mixed up in that. I always tell the the more sanitized version, but there was a lot of bad stuff going on in that situation and in that relationship. And a lot of times when you're in college, yes, you have a bad relationship or two. I just had one big long one that lasted 7 years because I saw that glimmer of hope, right? And it was very interesting because just a few years ago when I was talking to a CPA about this, the guy said to me, he's like, "Oh, you thought you could be his savior." And I was like, "No, I was just trying to help him." He was like, "No, you were trying to be his savior. And I never thought of it that way. I was like, "No, I'm helping him." And then I realized, oh no, I was getting my self-importance from helping him. And, coming out of that, doing the work in therapy, doing the financial coaching with my dad, because my dad basically sat down with me every week and went over things because I was so overwhelmed. I mean, everything was a mess. It's like if you walked into this house after a tornado had struck, you would just want to walk back out because every single room is a disaster from top to bottom. And my dad did the equivalent of just like turning my head and saying, "Do you see this closet? I want you to focus on this closet and clean this closet. Ignore the whole rest of your financial house and just do this one thing, and then we'll meet next week." And that's really what I needed because there was so much emotional overwhelm. And when I looked at my bills, I didn't just see numbers. There was a story behind each of those bills. When I looked at the Dillard's bill, I got pissed. You know why? Because the first Dillard's bill I got after I broke up with my ex, there was a charge on there from when he had bought my Valentine's Day present on my Dillard's card.
Wow.
And now I was stuck paying for it. Wow. Ask me how I felt about that.
Wow. When we talk about money and there being a story behind it and there being emotion behind it, I want to really dive deep into this because so far we're barely like even scratching the surface of the fact that the reason our finances are not working is because our finances are saying something about us. And many times they say something that we don't like, and we don't like to see ourselves that way. We don't want to admit that our numbers say that about us. Can you tell us a little bit more about developing a little bit of that sense of self-awareness, of not looking at numbers as hard figures and facts, but understanding that we are telling ourselves something about ourselves every time we look at them?
Yeah, when we were born, we had no opinions about money, right? And as we were growing up, we learned about money from people with emotions, people with flaws, people with their own money stories. And if we just even think about the things that we overheard our parents saying, many of them we unconsciously adopted as our own story because that's the environment that we grew up in. And so developing that awareness, that really is the first step because you can't change something that you're not aware of. I always tell people, pay attention to what you say about money and what you think about money and start writing it down. Don't judge it, just capture it. If you're part of a couple and you can do this together, this is even better because it's easier to hear it from somebody else than when you say it. Because when you say it, half the times you don't even hear what you're saying. You don't even pay attention to what you're thinking. It's just tapes running in the background. Yeah. And that really is the first step, is to cultivate that awareness.
Let's give some examples of what that sounds like. I'm going to give one that, when I look at, if I didn't make, if I spent more than I earned this month, that is not just a fact. That to me is, oh, I am a bad business owner, right? I say things like, I should be smarter. Why am I not smart enough to figure that out? Like I'm looking at these numbers and they're not just facts. They're just like, I don't want to admit these things out loud because they're going to say something about me.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, you simply spent more than you made in your business this month. Not even this year, not even for the entire lifetime of your business. And you have suddenly made that mean all these horrible things about yourself.
Right.
Whereas you could just say, isn't that interesting? I spent more than I made this month. Why is that? Well, we could just look at the facts and say, well, there's this mastermind that I invested in and I decided to pay for it up front rather than make monthly payments because I'm saving 20%. If I had made monthly payments, I wouldn't have spent more than I made. So part of it is we hone in on a piece of our money that is too small. Mm-hmm. If you would just widen your lens a little bit and you would say, well, if I look at this over 6 months, saving 20% on that mastermind is X amount of dollars. And that's a good thing. And then I won't have that payment next month, right? So, and I also think it is human nature for us to focus on the negative and to sweep the good things under the rug, right? Mm-hmm. So you could probably say, oh yes, there is this one thing that I did that maybe wasn't great this month, but what are all the other good things that I did? Oh my gosh, I recorded all these podcasts. I went to these networking events. I did this collaboration with this person. I sold all these courses, right? So 90% of your month was fantastic. And actually, if you kind of step back and look at it over a 6-month period, you're like, well, over the last 6 months, now if you spent in the red 6 straight months in your business, then that might mean that we need to make some changes. Yeah. But if only 1 out of the 6 months, it's not that big a deal.
What are some examples of things that people say to themselves when they're looking at their numbers?
Oh, gosh, all kinds of things. Sometimes it's their parents are in their head. You're so irresponsible. I told you you can't handle this. You'll never make it on your own.
But it comes from lived experiences. Like somebody at some point injected those ideas in your head because you started saying like we were not born with these ideas. So where did they come from?
Yeah. I mean, they came from all over the place. And what I find really super interesting is that for children who are under 7, they don't have the filter to examine what other people say to them and really ask themselves, is this true and do I want to believe it? Now, this is backed up by science because when you're between like ages 7 and 2, kids are primarily in theta brainwave versus adults are in alpha or beta while they're awake. And what that means is that filter, that part of us that judges things and says, yeah, that's not true. I don't want to believe that, right? Some troll on the internet says something bad about you. You're like, they don't even know me. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to believe that. Like, it might annoy me, but, whatever. Little kids don't have that. So if someone tells them they're stupid, they believe it. If someone tells them they're irresponsible and they're never going to amount to anything growing up, they believe it. And they internalize it, and it's stored down in their unconscious mind.
Wow.
And so they operate out of that money blueprint, which is a concept that I learned from T. Harv Eker in Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, which we're reading in the Wealthy Woman Book Club in a couple months.
Yeah, we're gonna be sharing a little bit more about the book club so everybody's aware of this. So let's go back to, we're talking about people who may be in a relationship where they feel like they're handling that load. And I thought you said something really important, which was about really figuring out if you're just being a nice person and being helpful, or if you're like enabling that behavior and how that is affecting you. So not to tell everybody who's listening, like you need to end this relationship, but are there ways that they can start to have some better habits, better behaviors in this relationship to start to get a little bit healthier? What would you say is like the next 3 steps that someone in that situation needs to do to start to heal?
Well, it does kind of depend, like, are you married to this person or not? Because when you're married to someone, the two of you are 50-50 partners in the joint venture known as your marriage. And so you are tied to that person financially. Thankfully, I did not marry my ex-fiance. I had a wedding dress in the closet, but I did not marry him, thank God. However, most of the debt was run up under my name. And I knew that if I left him, I was going to have to pay for all of it. But I also knew if I stayed with him, I was also going to have to pay for all of it. It certainly helps to talk to an outside third party, because if you are in a relationship with someone who is emotionally manipulative, you're not seeing things clearly. You're not. Now that I have space, I left that relationship 24 years ago. I can look back and I can see very clearly all the dangerous warning signs of, if I had stayed with him, I think things probably would have escalated. And in fact, there was an instance where, he had been drinking and he grabbed my arm and pushed me up against the wall. And the next day I had a bruise. And that was really one of the catalysts where it was like, this is going no place good. Yes, the money was a big issue, but it was not the only issue. And I see this from women at all income levels. A lot of times we like to think, oh, this just happens in the ghetto or the trailer park. Well, let me tell you, it doesn't. I've coached women who have been in, narcissistic, emotionally abusive relationships with men who are high up executives at financial institutions who are being controlled with money and not having access to money. So the unfortunate thing is that money gets tied up in all of those emotions. I like to say that when you're in a relationship, there's really three people: you, your partner, and money. Money is like that third person in the relationship. You have interactions with money. The other person has interactions with money. Money can't help but get involved in that relationship. And so one of the things that I had to do once I left that relationship was to heal my relationship with money, and just understanding that you have a relationship with your money might be a light bulb moment for some people. They might be like, oh, I've never thought about it that way before. But here's the thing. I didn't protect my money from my ex. I allowed my ex to misuse my money. And I felt a lot of guilt, and I almost felt like a parent who had let their child be misused or abused. That was almost how I felt about money. It was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, because I used to take good care of money. As a child and as a teenager, I took good care of my allowance. I think I had $2,000 or $3,000 in the bank at age 19 when I started dating my ex. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, I can't believe I did that. And I really started to think about, am I spending quality time with money? How am I taking care of it? Am I respecting it? And I think it was also extremely beneficial for me to have someone in my life when I started dating Nick, who became my husband, of 24 years now. We just celebrated our anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. To see someone my own age who was doing things with money the right way. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to get advice from your parents or professionals, but to have somebody that's, a peer, someone that's your same age, that was very beneficial. And I always tell parents that, because they say, how can I get my kid to read your book? Or how can I get my kid to listen to me? And I said, you know what? It's probably better if you identify who among your kids' friends is a good influence on them when it comes to money, and encourage that friendship.
Mm-hmm. Right. You said something that I kind of want to pause on. You said that there's so many stories of women who are, highly educated in relationships where they're being controlled through money. Can you tell me
Yeah.
more about what that looks like?
Yeah. Well, from the outside, you would never know it. You know, they're wearing nice clothes. They're driving nice cars. They might have designer purses. But they also may be getting an allowance. They might not have direct access to the checking accounts, or they might not know anything about the investments or what the family's net worth is. Now, are some people blissfully ignorant and are just like, hey, I married a rich guy, and as long as you're giving me so much money per week, I'm happy? Sure. But there are more situations like this than I really knew until I got involved in financial coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing women who are living in $600,000 to $1 million homes who are almost like children financially because their ex told them, you're too stupid to handle this, you're not organized, this is too hard for you. And then they find themselves in the middle of a divorce and they're like, I have to figure this out. I don't know what to do. And I tell them, like, look, this is something you can learn. This is not too hard for you. Money management is not a talent. It's a skill. Some people might find it easier, but we can learn this. And in those situations, there is a lot of hand-holding and there is a lot of me helping to build them up and helping to identify what are those negative voices in their head that we need to evict and replace.
Yeah, because never mind that, you may not be being told specifically by your spouse or by somebody that you can't handle this or that you can't learn it, but it is something very commonly we tell ourselves. I am not smart enough for that. I don't have a finance degree. I was always bad at math.
Yeah.
Right? We tell ourselves, I have no idea how to use a spreadsheet. Like we tell ourselves this all the time.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit of how do we, first of all, start to break out of that cycle of telling ourselves that we can't? Because I'm telling you, there are people listening right now like, no, but I really can't. Right? Like, you're telling me that I can't on quote marks, but I really can't. So can you shed a little bit of light on what would make anybody think that they could handle more financial knowledge?
Well, here's the thing. The math is really the easy part. All of us on our phones have a calculator. There are so many free and low-cost personal finance apps. If you go to websites like NerdWallet and Bankrate.com, there's all kinds of financial calculators. Like you just have to plug the numbers in and it does all the heavy lifting for you. So I think just writing down what are those things that you tell yourself, like I wasn't good at math. Okay, so maybe you weren't good at math. Well, guess what? You don't have to be good at math because technology takes care of all the math for you, right? I'm not very organized. Okay, maybe you're not very organized right now, but can we find a happy medium? Most people keep way too much paperwork. They keep way too many things. They make it way more complicated than it needs to be. When it really just needs to be pretty simple. And especially with the technology, it makes it a lot easier. So I think just like identifying those things, say, I can learn to be more organized. Enough. I can be organized enough to manage my finances. And I think, figuring out what are those things that we tell ourselves and then countering them. Now, they don't have to, I think the mistake that some people make is they try to go from, this is too hard for me, I'll never learn, to, I'm going to be great at this and it's easy for me. And then that internal voice is like, you're a big fat liar and completely dismisses it. So we just need to move the needle a little bit in the right direction. So we can say, this isn't too hard for me. I can learn this. It's a process. I'm going to be okay. That's one of the things that I tell the women who are going through divorce because they are in panic mode. And I'll say, look, you don't have to say, I'm a magnificent money manager. Because if you can't say that and feel good with a smile on your face and it makes you want to throw up, then you can say, I'm going to be okay. I'm in the process of improving my relationship with money. I can figure this out. I have help.
So let's talk about that help, because I don't think that everybody's aware that you can hire a coach. And what is the difference between hiring a coach, hiring a CPA, right? Like, can you shed some light on that? What is the difference between hiring a CPA and hiring a coach?
I say that there are 3 financial professionals that you need. A financial advisor handles your investments and sometimes your insurance. A CPA handles your taxes. A financial coach helps you manage your day-to-day money tasks and your mindset around money. You don't need a financial coach forever. People usually work with me for anywhere from 6 to 18 months. Usually, some people don't want to let me go after the initial 6 months, and they say, I think I want to keep you around for another year because this is beneficial. So I do have that offer once people go through the initial 6 months. However, during the 6 months is where we do a lot of the heavy lifting. So what I'm doing with my clients is, first of all, getting very clear on what does success look like for them. Because if you're in financial disorganization, if you're in financial crisis, most of the time you just think, I want to be out of crisis. You don't even think about, what does my ideal financial future look like? So we get really clear on that. Like, if you woke up tomorrow and money wasn't keeping you from your best life, what does that look like? Tell me about that. Then we shift to, okay, let's get our arms around what exactly is going on right now. Because I can't create a plan to get you over here if we don't know what over here is, right? So I drove down here to see you today. I wasn't going to get here if I didn't have the address. I also wasn't going to get here if my GPS didn't know my starting point. And it's the same thing with your finances. So the first month, we get really clear on what the heck is going on. And if people aren't tracking their spending, if they're not tracking their net worth, a lot of times they don't even really know exactly how much debt they have or what they're spending on certain things. And then in the second month is when we really start to get organized. We start to dig into the details, not because I'm judging their spending or judging what they're doing. I'm trying to find out what's the story behind this, right? I noticed that we're spending a lot of money on fitness and supplements. Tell me why that's important to you. Are you using all of these services and protein powders and different things? You know, if you are, great. If that's important to you, great. Okay, let's look at the next category. Why are we spending so much on this? Oh, well, we've got 25 subscriptions that are coming through our iPhone, and we don't even know what half of them are. Oh, why don't you pull up your iPhone and let's look, and then we can unsubscribe from things.
Right.
So there's a lot of digging into the weeds, getting things organized, optimizing things, figuring out exactly what works for them. And then we start tackling things like, okay, debt's a problem, right? We want to start looking at what are all our different areas of the debt. What is the most, not just the most efficient way to pay it off, but also the most emotionally satisfying way to pay it off. Because I mentioned that Dillard's bill from my past, even though that wasn't the highest interest rate, I paid that one off first because I didn't like the fact that every single time I got it, it felt like a punch in the gut.
Yeah.
And it made me feel bad about myself, and it made me feel mad at my ex. So I thought, you know what? I don't care what's mathematically correct. I'm going to pay that one off because it makes me mad.
I like that. So like prioritizing. And I do want to say, when I was in my 20s, I was making really good money. I had a really good job and I didn't have a lot of expenses, but I started to notice that my bank account would get lower and lower and lower every month. So I went to these like American Express financial advisors and they walked me through things and they're like, okay, so if you pay us $600, we will go through and like catalog all your income and expenses. And I looked at them and I'm like, I just told you about my entire money. I you think I have $600 to give you? Like that was your conclusion, that I can pay you $600 to do that? I said no, thank you. But I set it in my mind to go back and just start tracking. And I have to say, like, tracking my money became actually really fun because it became like a game. And I just started doing this in a very simple spreadsheet, literally like date, the vendor, or like who did I buy something from, what the amount was. It's like keeping it very simple. To this day, I keep a spreadsheet like that. It's been 20 years since I started creating that spreadsheet. And in my business, I just track it that way because it makes me feel in control. Checking, and it's gone from I never used to check my bank account at all to now I want to check it every day, because since I manually put things into the spreadsheet because it's like an exercise for me to know where my money is. I want to check my money every single day. I want to check that because if an expense came in through the credit card, I don't want it to get to next week where I have 10 expenses to go and track. So I like to do that like one per day. I'm just gonna go in and do one per day. So actually that became like the super fun part. And the first time that I started doing that spreadsheet for my business expenses, I discovered that I was paying for 2 Canva subscriptions, that I was paying for 2 hosting plans for my website, and that I had like all of these little things that I knew how to do workarounds for, that I didn't really need to buy that app for that. And so I just encourage everybody just to go through that very simple exercise without judgment of and do this for a year, because some subscriptions are a year subscriptions. So you don't just track it for a month, track it for a year so you can discover the things that you didn't really know that they were there. So I would say take a year to just meticulously just track. It could be in a notebook, it could be in a spreadsheet, it could be in one of those apps that will give you metrics and all these things. Do you have a preferred app that you like for people to start tracking in?
Yeah. Well, the last time I publicly said what I liked, it went away. So.
Oh, no. Don't jinx anything people use now.
I know.
Don't jinx it.
No. If you want to reach out to me personally, I'll tell you which one I use, which I'm currently using in case you're listening to this like 5 years in the future.
Right.
And let me just say, if when you heard spreadsheet, you broke out into hives, calm down. It doesn't have to be done in a spreadsheet.
It's just a list, guys.
Yes, it is.
Literally just a list.
It is.
Well, and that's why lists.
That's why I love these apps, because especially if you are spending money in multiple bank accounts across multiple credit cards, if you're married and your spouse is doing the same thing, it can be hard to say, what are we spending on eating out? Because if you're spending eating out dollars and you're spending it in Venmo and you're spending it on credit cards and out of your bank account, how are you going to pull that all into one place? Well, the beautiful thing about these budget apps, these personal finance apps, is that they pull everything in, right? You hook up all your credit cards, all your bank accounts, all your investment accounts. You see everything all in one place. And it makes life so much easier.
Yeah. I love that. So before we like wrap up, I want to like reel everything in and summarize in here. So give me like the top 3 things people need to keep in mind in terms of their money mindset and what they can do to start digging themselves out of a hole, like a list of 3 things they need to do.
Start paying attention to what you say about money, what you're saying, what you're thinking about money. Write it down. How can you incrementally improve that self-talk, right? You don't have to take it from a negative 10 to a positive 10, but how can we at least skew it slightly positive? Pay attention to your numbers, right? So pay attention to your words, pay attention to your numbers. Even just looking at your spending, looking at your checking accounts, paying attention to what's coming out of your bank account, your PayPal. Are you still using those things? If not, cancel them. That's like an easy first step. The third step is read or listen to something that is going to keep money at the forefront of your mind. So listen to the Money is Emotional podcast.
Money's Emotional Podcast. And please tell us, we didn't touch on your book, Provider Money, Pleasure Money. Tell us what your book is about. We're going to put the link to it below so everybody can go and get it.
Well, I will say, if you're a beginner to really taking control of your money, I would recommend my first book, which is Money is Emotional, Prevent Your Heart from Hijacking Your Wallet. So that's going to cover all of the areas of personal finance, and it covers the unique emotional landmines in each area of your personal finances, including your relationship. So there's some excellent advice in there as well. The newest book, Provider Money, Pleasure Money, is all about the energetics of personal finance. And if you don't read the first book and have the foundations and the basics, I'd go back there first.
Tell us more about the energetics.
Well, here's the thing. Albert Einstein said everything is energy. Money is energy. That's why we call it currency. Honestly, if you think about money, it's just something that we've made up. Right? It's literally pieces of paper. It's zeros in our bank account. But there is an energy to our money. And the easiest way for me to explain it, which is going to be a weird analogy, is the circus trapeze. So you need two pieces of equipment to enjoy the trapeze at the circus. You need the swing and you need the safety net. If you have a swing and no safety net, that's not fun. That's terrifying. If you have a net with no swing, you've completely missed the point. And so we need both of these energies in our finances. A lot of times when people think about hiring a financial coach, they think that I'm going to take all the fun out of their money. And they're like, oh, she's just going to make me eat ramen noodles and I'm never going to get to have any fun. No, that's not the point of it. We want to look at where are the holes in your safety net. And those are things like knowing where your spending is going, having some emergency savings, having those investments for the future, having the right pieces of estate planning and insurance and those things that are going to catch you if you fall financially. Mm-hmm. But then we also look at, are we getting enjoyment out of our money? Because what's interesting is a lot of times people are spending so much money and they're not even enjoying what they're spending it on. Right. They're not being intentional about it. And so if your finances are not in great shape and your safety net has a lot of holes, we might only be able to hang your swing 15 feet above the ground because we don't want you to hurt yourself. Mm-hmm. Now, my goal is that you have an amazingly strong safety net so that you can hang your swing from the stars. But if you try to hang your swing from the stars and you don't have a good safety net, then you are basically going from pleasure to terror in your finances. Yeah. And that's going to leave you very emotionally unregulated. Yeah. And that's not healthy.
I love that because I recently actually started making sure that I have this bank of expenses in my bank account, especially with, as a coach, you make money sometimes when you launch and then you don't, and then you do, and then you don't. Mm-hmm. So you kind of need to know that your business is still going to be here next month. Yes. That you don't have to let go of your entire staff next month because this was a rough month.
Right.
So I love that idea of giving that mm-hmm. safety net. So we're going to be putting the link to the book below. I just have 2 more questions for you. Number 1, what do you think is the biggest misconception that people have of you as a successful businesswoman?
That your success is consistent day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. It's not. And this is true for anyone who's been successful. We think that success is a straight line that goes up and to the right. It doesn't. It's more like going around the mountain, right? Sometimes there are switchbacks. Sometimes you slide back. Sometimes you fall halfway down the mountain. You have to get back up, dust yourself off, and keep going. The thing that differentiates the people that don't succeed to the ones that do, who have been in business for a long time, because I went full-time in my business 12 years ago. It's the people who don't quit. It's the people who keep going. And I would be lying to you if I said there have been times, there's never been a time that I've thought about quitting, and life has just been one success after another. I would be lying because I have thought about quitting and going back to a full-time job. There have been times when I've done that, and that was not within my first 2 years of business either. So sometimes crap happens. But if you have a heart mission inside of your business, that's the thing that's going to keep you going, and that's going to keep you successful for the long term.
The only way to fail is to quit.
Exactly.
And the last question is, if everybody who's listening had to do what you're about to tell them to do, and they have to do it in the next 24 hours, what would that thing be?
Automate your savings. Set up a transfer from your checking to your savings to happen the day after you get paid, or once a month if you're an entrepreneur, for a set amount. Set it and forget it. You'll thank me later.
Love that. Christine, thank you so much for being here and sharing all of this with us. I really hope that it has shaken some things loose in everybody's mind and that everybody's going to have a great relationship with money from now on. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Where can everybody find you and follow you?
Yes. So I am most active on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can find me on my website, christineluken.com. There's links there for the books and for the Wealthy Woman Book Club.
And we're going to be putting all those links below. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. And go and follow and subscribe so you don't miss another episode of the Superhumans Podcast.